what is human-computer interaction? So, it's quite a diverse field. It has a lot of different elements to it. So I don't think you can be an expert in this field without dedicating your life to it. But as you can see there's things around psychology, computer science, artificial intelligence, philosophy, media, design. There's a whole lot of elements that are at play when we're talking about human-computer interaction. And what we wanted to talk about a little bit is, how things have evolved over time. I mean, when we were kids, things were very different to now, and that was just a few decades ago, right? A little bit about kind of, where things have gone so far. I mean, you might remember that things started off with punch cards. So just in the kind of, I'd say 80s and 70s, people were using punch cards to communicate with computers. And then shortly after that, the personal computer kind of had a boom where we were interacting with a screen, we're interacting with peripherals like a mouse and a keyboard, and then eventually touchscreen technology and VR technology. Now, if we think a little bit about how people interacted with the very, very early versions of personal computers, the file system. So if you look here, this is a screenshot of Windows 3.1, and this is a screenshot of Windows 10, right? So what we're using these days, or Mac OS. And you'll see a lot of similarities. Not a lot has changed in terms of the information architecture of these things. And there's a reason for that, right? So the thinking behind this window and folder-based kind of operating system was mainly to represent the real-world file system. So taking that analogy, help people interact with the computer in an easier way. And I don't know if you all know this or not, but Solitaire, that card game we used to play on the old computers, that wasn't actually designed to be entertaining. That was actually a game provided to help people better learn how to use a mouse. So to left click, right click, drag. I don't know if you recall the game, but all of those interactions were built into it, and it was actually a way to train people to use a mouse. And there's a whole bunch of other things. So we were dealing with touch screens these days. I mean, your phone or your iPad, or sometimes even your smart devices at home work with touchscreen. And then we're getting into we're kind of in the stage of voice and audio, right? So all of your assistants like Siri or Google Assistant or whatever the case might be, your interaction with those computers are through just voice, just language. And what's important here is language models. So I'm pretty sure you've had many times where it didn't really understand what you wanted, but over time it might have learned that. So, even though those visual analogies were useful and training was required, in the voice world, that's also a concern, right? There's a whole lot of different languages in the world, different dialects, different accents, and it's pretty interesting. A little bit about virtual assistants. What's really interesting for me about them is that they kind of give you this feeling of something that's as intelligent as a human almost, but it's kind of a facade. So it's got the voice, and then it uses all sorts of tools in the background to help you, like Spotify or YouTube or other APIs and other systems, to achieve whatever command or whatever you're asking from it. Cool. And then finally, the future maybe is brainwaves. So when we're talking about brainwaves, I'm sure you might have heard of Neuralink, one of Elon Musk's companies that are trying to kind of make interfaces for our brains. They're starting with trying to help patients with Alzheimer's and those sorts of conditions, Parkinson's, I believe. And they're testing it on pigs with some pretty good results. I don't think everyone knows that this is not something new, though. So they're using a technique called deep brain stimulation, which has been around for quite a while. There's other technology that does it. And essentially, they stick nodes into your brain and they stimulate it with electricity. And when that part of your brain is stimulated, it helps with some of those diseases I mentioned. So what they're trying to do is do the same thing, but making the procedure less invasive. And ultimately, they don't just want to be able to stimulate the brain, they want to be able to read thoughts from the brain and potentially put thoughts into the brain, which is really interesting. And that's just Neuralink. There's a whole bunch of other technologies and devices that are already being used to help people control computers. So there's devices that you can use to control computer games. If you're thinking about going left, it will go left. If you're thinking about going right, it'll go right. So there's already some of those out there. And a very interesting one, this company made this device that goes over your head, almost like headphones. And what it does is it helps you learn motor skills. So if you want to do martial arts, you can learn it a lot quicker. Or if you want to learn tennis or dancing or whatever, you can do it a lot quicker. And fun fact about that device specifically, its biggest market, can anyone guess its biggest market? Its biggest market was couples getting married. So they could learn a choreographed dance that they wanted to perform at their wedding faster, right? So it was pretty interesting when I learned about that. So yeah, those are the three kind of areas I guess you could have told from the title of this panel discussion that we wanted to kind of introduce and talk about. Cool. So as panel guests here, I've got Sean Buch. So he's a CX lead at Intellect. I work with him, I guess, fairly often. He's a bit of a guru in terms of customer experience, user experience, psychology with computers, and yeah, really has a lot of knowledge in that area and kind of how humans operate. And then also Kriya Gangiah, who's from a very different background to Sean and myself. Kriya is a radio presenter, a model, a TV presenter, a businesswoman, how many other things, I don't know. But yeah, as you can see, Kriya is actually at one of her events at the moment, so thanks for joining. And then it's myself. I'm Rishal Hurbans. I'm a senior manager at Intellect. I'm also the author of a book called Grokking AI Algorithms. I have a passion in that area for kind of technology and the future of technology, as well as its impact on the world and people around it, right? Cool. So I think to get started, maybe I'd like to pose a question to Sean and Kriya. Can you remember your first interactions with a computer and kind of what you used it for? Maybe Sean, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. Excuse me. So this is maybe less first interaction with the computer and more just a memory that really stands out to me, engaging with the computer when the web first sort of came out in a popular way in South Africa. We still had dial-up. So I remember I was very into comic books at that stage, and there were these comic book characters, Gen X, which were kind of like young X-Men. And I remember being on, I think it was probably a very basic Flash website where you rolled over the sort of the screen, and then the characters would kind of pop up as you rolled over. So if you can imagine a black screen and then kind of a reveal. And I was like, this is the internet. And it just blew my mind. And yeah, that's a memory that really sticks with me to this day. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's interesting. For me, I also remember a lot of games and that. And Kriya, do you remember your first interactions with a computer?
So for me, I grew up actually with my dad, who was very involved in kind of the development of the internet and how South Africa actually got into the dial-up area within, the internet sphere. So for me, it was always my dad trying to explain these things to me, work with me on these things. And that was kind of my first interaction with internet and a computer. And I think from there, it just developed on being unbelievably curious to now actually making money from it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think I remember you telling me a story, and I think I heard it from your dad himself, actually. His kind of career in that area is pretty interesting. Um, yeah, and I'd say from my side, I remember I was a little kid, and I guess I was fortunate enough that my dad was also in the IT space, and he brought back computers from work that he needed to install like Windows 95 on or whatever. And he'd give me this game to play. He'd say, here's this like 50 floppy disks, or sorry, stiffy disks. And he says, when this command comes up, you got to change the disk with the right number. And years later, I realized this guy was actually, I was child labor to install operating systems for my dad, right? So I was doing this repetitive work to get it going. But yeah, that was one of the first memories I have of a computer. I think a lot of us got into technology because we really liked games as kids.
I think for me, I remember there was this game. It was a tanks game, which was three-dimensional. I could never beat it. I don't know if anyone remembers. I think it may have even come on a floppy. Looked kind of like DOS-like. That one was pretty interesting for me. And I think what's interesting about gaming generally is just that there is an artificial intelligence there to an extent within the gaming engines, and the fact that it can kind of wipe the floor with you, but it has to be programmed in such a way that you can still beat it. It's a bit of a hollow victory, but I don't like to think about that too much. I still do some gaming, so yeah.
No, that's true. I mean, like probably every game in existence could beat you, but they choose not to. I wanted to share something. I did a little bit of an experiment for a week. I wrote this little script that would track all my clicks, right? And this was the outcome. So I use about 36 different applications in a week, 64 unique websites. I would have thought that number would be a lot higher. And then 41 gigabytes on this specific laptop. So I'm not counting the other computers I have. And in that week, there was a total of 32,139 clicks across all these applications, which is a lot, I think. And there's a breakdown of the different applications that I use most often, and how many clicks they had. And I did this experiment actually for a different talk that was centered around how can we learn more about human or users' interactions with the applications we're building. So these are basically the apps that I use the most. Miro is an online whiteboarding tool. Use that a lot with collaborating with my customers, my teams. And then obviously, I think remote work had a lot to do with the WhatsApp, Discord, Slack, Telegram side of things. But what's really interesting here, right, is Spotify only has 321 clicks. I have Spotify open all the time. I listen to music in between meetings and all of that. But Spotify has the best recommendations of music for me, right? I have like this diverse kind of taste in music, but I also don't like very specific music, and it's learned that from these very few clicks. So I brought this up because I'd like to ask the panel, maybe Kriya, can you maybe think of how often do you use a computer these days? So you spoke about, how you got into it and that, and how has it become part of your life these days? What apps do you use the most?
That was an interesting thing why I said that kind of me being here and out and about today will really contribute to this conversation quite a bit. So we do obviously with my company, which Rishal touched on a little bit, is essentially a digital marketing agency. We work with big brands to kind of develop how their business touches the digital space. So from e-commerce to social media marketing to kind of understanding their clients online. And it's everyone from JSE listed companies all the way down to low LSM wholesale market companies, which is actually the golf day that we're at today. And interesting enough that from apps and things that we use, especially within our company, we do a lot of things like video editing, sound editing, filming, capturing images, capturing an event. And today, I've been here since 6 o'clock this morning or 5:30. This was the first time I took out my laptop today. Every single other thing that I did completely and entirely from my phone. I didn't even take out an actual DSLR camera. Everything from capturing videos to capturing images to editing to putting things together to posting it, sharing, dealing with consumers, everything was done from this little device.
Wow, that's super interesting. So basically all of your work theoretically could be done off your phone.
Exactly. You don't even need a tablet. You don't need a computer. For us, if I have an internet connection and I have a device that I can download apps onto, whether it be a PC, a cell phone, or a tablet, I can literally work from anywhere in the world. And I think the fact that I'm sitting on Royal Joburg in the middle of the bush is testament to that.
I saw this quote recently where someone's opinion was the amount of freedom you have in your job is measured by how much of it you can do from your phone. So if he's accurate, then you have a lot of freedom.
I really and truly do. But
Okay.
going back to your question about the apps, I think what's really nice is nowadays I'm an Apple user, and I know there's some people that's probably on here that are not big Apple fans. But the linking between devices and the usability of it is amazing. So let's say, for example, I'm editing something in Final Cut Pro on my computer. I can literally export it as an iMovie file, airdrop it to my phone, edit it in iMovie on my phone. And I think that's what's really important for a user. And it's not only me who's, obviously I do this every single day in my life, but you speak to people that are kind of trying small business development, and they are developing their own social media and their own digital platforms. This has become such an integral part for them to be able to use all your technology and all your apps together. You've really seen that this is a core element for user development moving forward.
Yeah, I definitely see that trend as well. I mean, even with, especially with small businesses, now that you talk about it, there's so many startups and so much work being done into providing the software suites that can be easily accessible to small businesses. Everything from invoicing or customer management, customer interactions. You have a call center in a box where you could, handle that yourself or even outsource it. So it's super interesting how things are going. And I think, when we're talking about technology, it's hard not to talk about the economy as well, because I think everything's interlinked. And I think, with the current state of things, with a lot of people being retrenched and, job cuts and things from COVID, I think there's going to be a lot more people trying to do their own thing where these tools are going to be leveraged quite a bit. And you're going to need that sort of, seamlessness that you just described.
Yeah.
So just on that, before I get to Sean, if you didn't have your phone and you didn't have the kind of tech you have, do you think you'd be doing the same kind of work?
I think it'll be a little bit different in terms of the amount of stuff we are able to do. Obviously, quality-wise, having a amazing Canon camera that costs 80,000 Rand is great, and we can do everything from there as well. Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, drop photos to your phone, all that sorts of jazz. But I think if you don't have the tech, one, we wouldn't be able to have things like social media, because what in the world are we going to upload without the tech? But I don't think that I would even have a job. Never in my life did I think, Rishal, we studied together. Growing up, who thought I'd make a living off Facebook? That wasn't a course people taught us. That wasn't something that, we learned at school. Who ever thought that? My mother still doesn't believe it. I think she still thinks that I'm a bum somewhere.
It's all a facade.
Yeah. Like she's selling drugs. That's the only reason she has money.
Okay, cool. I guess, Sean, on your side, kind of, I don't know if you have any comments on what Kriya was just talking about, or you want to talk about, your kind of impression of the apps you use and the tech you use, and how valuable is it to you today?
Yeah, I think just touching on what Kriya said, we're talking really about like omni-channel versus multi-channel. So we speak about these concepts like a multi-channel is when you sort of have different interfaces you engage with, whether it's a television, a phone, or a laptop, etc. But we've really moved to omni-channel through the cloud, where a user can basically choose which platforms they engage on. So, Kriya talking about moving from Final Cut, then to iMovie, then sort of uploading back up to, say, a content channel. It's just that flexibility of use between the different platforms. And those things have only been enabled more recently, but I think devices are sort of receding into the background. Like she spoke about the Canon camera being less important. Also with that Canon camera, I assume you wouldn't actually be able to update the software in the same way you can with a phone.
Nope.
So it becomes sort of a device that can date very quickly. Your phone, as long as it can accept those updates, is always a very flexible device, has a much longer longevity. And if you think about how personal that is, would you rather give someone your ID or your credit card, which you don't want to do, or the keys to your car? Would you want to rather give them the PIN code to your phone? And if you think about how much power they would have over you with just that PIN code, you can see how important the device has become for us. Yeah.
So you'd give away your car instead of your PIN code to your phone. Is that what you're saying?
Probably, yeah, because that has access to my banking, but I suppose they need my fingerprints. So let's just say free access to my phone versus a very expensive personal object. And it's not the phone itself, obviously, right? That's a few $1,000, but it's the connectivity, it's the various channels that it can engage with, and sort of the risk that's part of that. So, and also the personal content on there, which is very important to you.
Kriya, that's the interesting thing. I'm interested in would you give away your car or full access to your phone?
So the reason why Rishal is asking this question is because I'm a car fundy. And I'm very involved in motorsport, not only in South Africa, but around the world. And it depends which car you're referring to. No, I totally agree with Sean. I think free access to a device, even my smartwatch. With my watch, I can literally do payments on my watch. So if you know the code, which is the same code to my phone, just FYI, you can get into anything. You can spend as much money as I possibly have by just having this device.
All that drug money.
All the drug money, that's it. The industry's tough at the moment, okay? Thanks to Sol. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, so, what are your general thoughts about, we kind of spoke about the tech that we're using, and maybe the tech that, some small businesses, even large businesses, are taking advantage of, and the way we interact with computers. So things have changed quite a bit, especially during lockdown for me, right? So you might be able to see this monitor here. There's a giant monitor here. There's a giant monitor here. There's a laptop here. There's another laptop in the lounge for if I want to work in the lounge. There's my iPad. And I think that kind of seamlessness you guys were talking about was really key. I mean, even with music, so I could play music in my lounge and just carry on seamlessly, no glitches or anything with the song here, right? So I'm like using voice commands for my lights and my music, and I've got this big workstation here. And obviously we're dealing a lot more with these kind of video conversations. So things have changed quite drastically for me. And I think it's worth talking just briefly about what we think of this current situation. So my view on it is that, people think after COVID happens, things are going to go back to normal. And in my mind, I don't know if there's going to be an after COVID. There's already predictions about another epidemic that will come out in the next coming years. People are going to be very cautious. A lot of people are, and organizations are already geared towards kind of working remotely. So in my opinion, I think it's kind of, going to be mostly the future. There's going to be some edge cases where, people work in offices or on site where needed. And I wanted to get your input on that. How do you think it's been going? I know Sean and I kind of work in a very similar environment. Kriya, for you, since kind of a year ago, it's been a year now, right? So how has your last year been in terms of kind of working and getting out and doing things, or have you also been at home?
I think one thing that I kind of pick up from chatting to both you and Sean, and I'm sure a lot of people that are on this call as well are in the IT industry or in the development space or in that kind of field. I'm very simplifying it. I think what's very interesting is we take where you guys are coming from. And you guys are working with tech every single day. You guys know what Alexa is, and you guys know what the cloud is. And I think we need to take it back a little bit to the simple user, where I had to explain to someone the other day how to send me something via AirDrop. So I think the different degrees at which we all talk to each other, you guys are very much so on the development side, and I'm very much so on the actual physical user interfacing or user using the device or the app. I think one thing that I've seen is that a simple user who may have used their cell phone for logging onto Instagram, making a call, sending a WhatsApp, has jumped leaps and bounds during COVID to a point where now tech needs to develop a little bit more to include the masses of people that are now going in this direction, which I think is amazing, really and truly is, because instead of now having to break things down in meetings to simple terms, people are using it every day. And I think moving forward, we're just going to see that increase, because I feel like once this bug has bit, that it's just going to literally infect the world.
Yeah, it's interesting. So a lot of the people you work with tend to, a lot of their work is not writing emails or having a workshop or building software or designing something on a computer. It seems like a lot of their work is constrained by the physical world. They have to be in the physical world.
I think if you go back to your slide with your clicks, I can tell you now that at least 80% of the people that I interact every single day with won't know what Slack is.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, it makes me think about it because my I guess field of view of the world can also be a little bit small, I guess, if I'm thinking about the people I work with. That's a lot of people. There's 1,000 people now at our company, and we work with hundreds of other people around the world and things. And that's easy for you to think, oh, that's the world now. And you forget that actually you are a very small percentage of the real world. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Sean, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like that idea of the different types of people that engage with technology and, sort of different levels at which people interact. I know my nephews are sort of already on track. They're the eldest one's using the iPad. The other one has sort of stolen the phone from my sister a few times and sort of run around and sort of talk to me in his, level of language that he has at the moment. But yeah, it's a completely different world for them, and I think just because of the ubiquity and the price point of technology coming down, I think eventually it should be spread. Hopefully we'll kind of close that gap, which is very much an economic gap, or sometimes it's sort of age-wise and that sort of stuff. I think what's so powerful is this concept of voice that you're speaking to, Rishal, because essentially a human is very good. A computer is very good at sort of the do what I say, not what I mean. So you tell the computer exactly what to do and it does it. But if you can do what I mean, what I'm trying to get to, and AI can then empower computers to interpret human beings, I think that technology barrier will be readily reduced, because essentially everyone knows how to speak, right? Not everyone knows how to engage with software. So if software does utilize voice and that sort of thing, and also be able to detect emotions with emotion AI, etc., then it sort of breaks down that barrier. You can just talk to your phone. Your phone can intuit what you need, and I think that's pretty powerful. I think that'll break down a lot of software barriers in a sense.
Don't you think, Sean, that besides computers needing to go through a little bit of a learning curve, the human's going to have to go through it as well? Because I think maybe my 7-year-old niece or nephew, when he or she turns 7, won't need to go through that educational process, but the generations that we're in will, I think they really do.
Yeah, 100%. And so within my field, the key thing is designing for kind of the extremities, sort of your super users and your novice users. So hopefully we get that right. We don't always, but essentially what you'd want to do is design for the most capable and the least capable users. So the people in the mean are pretty much taken care of. And we also speak to concepts of accessibility. So people that have sort of disabilities, whether it's a color blindness or a cognitive impairment, etc. It's a really important way that we design. Not everyone gets that right. Definitely do not get that right. I mean, I know I get confused by applications and I design applications. I have to ask my friends, I won't mention the bank, but one of my friends looks after design at one of the banks, and I had to ask him how I could transfer money to myself. I couldn't find a way to do it because I'd left my wallet at home. And, I design apps. So, these things need to be much more intuitive. I think voice will help with that and sort of more human interaction. But I think it's also up to us in tech to make a real effort to design platforms that are really usable by all.
Yeah, that's some good points. What's the one app you can't survive without from a work and personal perspective? Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
So you guys will all laugh at this. I have actually put on a phone block that blocks my Instagram after 2 hours a day, because it has gotten to the point that besides work and personal, I go through like 500 gigs of data in 9 days, guys, on Instagram.
Wow.
It's
I think
crazy.
that's
I'll
an
actually,
addiction.
it's an addiction. It really is. I'll bring up my usage and then we'll have this. But definitely Instagram for work and for personal life.
Well, I think the drug, we were talking about drugs before as a joke, but the drug is the social media. So if you guys have watched that Social Dilemma, I think that's what it's called. I hope that's what it's called. There's this fellow, Tristan Harris, who speaks about sort of designers that intentionally create cues for you to continue. They interview this one guy who created that infinite scroll on Instagram. Apparently, there was no infinite scroll before then. But what he had said was, it's like having a glass of wine that you never have to actively refill. So actually the action of refilling something and having an empty bottle, sort of a stop, makes you think, should I have another? But with something like infinite scroll on Instagram, it's just completely takes over, and you get those endorphins rush through the notifications, etc. So it's very much like a drug, yeah.
I've done 271 gigs in 10 days on Instagram.
Wow. And the pictures aren't large, right? So that means you must be watching a lot of pictures or videos, right? I think recently, Instagram, fairly recently, they lost some sort of case or something, and they had to introduce that block you're talking about, Sean. So now when you're browsing Instagram, it will show you all the posts you haven't seen yet, and then it will say you've finished seeing all the posts. Here's some related posts, right? Or you can choose to see all the posts. And I think they were forced to do that because people were just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And I don't think it's actually stopped them, because you get people that are using 270 gigs of data in 10 days on Instagram, like Kriya.
Okay, my work also has Instagram. I'm just putting it
Fair
out
enough,
there.
yeah. Sean, on what you just mentioned, I was also thinking about, okay, don't judge me for this. So I downloaded TikTok recently. And I always kind of, like, since it came out, I was always like against it, right? Because it seemed like it was an annoying thing that Gen Y people are into, and it's not for me. And, but I downloaded it, and it was probably the worst decision I've made most recently, because it's the same thing. You just keep on scrolling. And one thing I was thinking about, though, is the videos are so short, they can only be a maximum of a minute, right? What is that doing to our concentration spans? Because I already know, because of Twitter, I'm on Twitter quite often, I read books less, because it feels more of an effort to read pages in a book when one tweet can be really meaningful. And similarly with TikTok, a 30-second video can entertain you and give you that dopamine hit, or would you watch a YouTube video that's 5-10 minutes long? So yeah, I think similarly to Instagram, the TikTok thing's also, I think, potentially diminishing our kind of concentration spans.
Yeah, and they're so good at queuing these things up, because obviously they're personalizing. So like how you love Spotify, they keep reinforcing and showing you the same thing. If you have sort of more racist views, unfortunately, it'll keep reinforcing those views until you become a conspiracy theorist. But it's very, very good at the personalization, and it makes it incredibly addictive. I mean, I've had to, the AI essentially is so good. It's, like talking to a friend in a sense. So what I've had to do is kind of like put my phone away and sit with a physical book, because I've actually felt like this kind of, I can't explain it, but like my head just hurts. And I wonder if down the line there might be a return to kind of the physical, like how people like playing vinyl records. Maybe in the future, where everyone's virtual, they'll say, I've decided to go outside today. And everyone's like, wow, that's so retro,
That's so hipster.
Yeah, it would be the hipster thing of the future. Yeah. It would be interesting to see an academic study of reading habits of children. Are they changing, or have they changed? Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. I assume the answer would be that there has been quite a massive change. It's actually something that I haven't explored, is the effects of things like personalization, of interfaces on the human brain, in a sense, like reducing the capacity or making us a little bit sort of more stupid. So yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. I don't actually know. I know that the Yuval Noah Harari in *Sapiens* says that the sort of ancient man was significantly smarter than us, more skilled than us in a sense, because that one person had to deal with an array of different things, from kind of knowledge of forest animals, poisonous sort of berries, etc., as well as how to create weapons. If you dropped us back then, we would just die immediately. So maybe in this way, we're kind of losing abilities that are a bit harder to learn, require a bit more brain power. Maybe we're going into the future, maybe we'll be less capable. But that's just a complete stab in the dark. So, yeah.
On that, I read somewhere recently, I can't recall where, but apparently a useful way to get your children to be better at reading is turn subtitles on the YouTube videos they watch. Natural for them to have, like, it's in their face, they're going to read it and they're going to watch. So apparently having subtitles or captions enabled on the videos your kids are watching is a good approach to help them get better at reading. I don't know how valid that is or how well it works, but it's an interesting thing to try.
Force them to watch sort of foreign films, and they won't understand it, or watch their favorite thing in another language. Then they'll say, you have to read these subtitles.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there are studies showing that it's a lot more difficult to learn languages and things as an adult than as a kid. You just grasp concepts a lot more easier. We have another question here. What is your biggest fear with regards to your relationship with computers and artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so I'm fascinated by this, and there are two sides of the coin. You kind of get your Elon Musks or Stephen Hawkins who say this singularity is going to destroy us all, and you get other guys, for example, Steven Pinker, who's a cognitive scientist but very much involved in the AI community. His thing, which I think kind of stuck with me, is why would a conscious sentient being want to be destructive? And I don't know, what we sort of frame these things in terms of a human context. Why would it want to be destructive? Why would it want to take over, etc.? Those are quite human attributes, and I've been thinking about that quite a lot. I think from a user perspective, one of the fears, maybe with AI or maybe with kind of privacy more broadly, is the idea of kind of mining data, more and more data, and creating these intelligent profiles about you so you can sort of get better advertising. I think that's probably one of the immediate fears. And then kind of that long-term fear is this feeling that we'll work towards the singularity. We'll go from general AI to super AI, and then we'll just all be kind of in Westworld, right? We'll all just be kind of subject to the machine in a sense. Yeah.
What are your thoughts around the ethics of human interaction with robots?
But it's kind of an interesting other side of it. It's like, the AI is a threat to us versus us as a threat to a robot potentially. So I don't know if what Ravon means by ethics are kind of doing something destructive. So if I go back to the Westworld analogy, the robots were there purely for human hedonism, for pleasure, and then they became sentient, and enacting any violence upon them was actually morally wrong. So I think there's that concept. As machines become more intelligent, where do they sit within our sort of social strata? Are they going to be sort of the lowest laborers, or are they going to be kind of godlike? What's quite interesting is with the human interaction with robots is that Japan only outlawed sort of pedophilic content, so sort of pornographic content more recently. But the kind of the sex robot space, a lot of these robots are designed to look like young girls. So what are the ethics of sort of having a sexual interaction with a robot that looks childlike? Where would we sit with that? These are very weird questions to think about, but it's all part of this kind of this robot sort of ethics around robotics. Yeah.
I think it's interesting because I'm just going to look at this objectively, right? So it's pretty messed up what we just spoke about, right? It's the act of doing it, right? But we don't have a problem at all with making a robot work really hard, like do really hard manual labor, like a slave would. Okay, like ethically that feels fine, but then childlike sex robot is very problematic. Kriya, what do you think about this?
I'm just laughing because in my mind, I automatically thought you were going with child labor versus child sex labor. It's quite an interesting thought pattern. I think there's a lot of the things that doesn't really touch my sphere. Listening to you guys talk about it, I never really thought about half the things that Sean has even brought up. I was like, it's interesting. It's quite a topic that we don't, and we as users, I'm saying me as a user because you guys are the dev guys. We as users don't think about that. We're just like, cool, we get great sex and coffee. Yay.
Yeah, like I think also in is it Japan, Sean? The esports has got a really big scene. So there's a problem where males are spending all of their time playing games competitively, and they're making big money from this, right? They're playing online games and making all this money, and they're not actually interested in a relationship. They rather get a doll, or a robot, which is like a little bit mind-blowing, right?
It also, like, what does that mean for procreation? Like, is it necessary for us to procreate if we have sentient beings that we can engage with? If you take that to its logical conclusion, the robots won't kill us violently; they'll kill us through love. We basically will stop the species. It'll be like the last man with his robot girlfriend, and then he dies, and that's the end of humanity.
I feel like there's a movie in there somewhere, Sean.
I was thinking the exact same thing. That sounds like a plot for a movie.
Yeah. It's sort of Her too,
Yeah.
Yeah. Demon Seed is the movie, by the way. I wonder if there is an actual
But
movie.
there you go, there is one.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I'm late to the party.
Okay, I need
Rish,
to check that out.
Rish, I think you had there's a question that might be good for you. He wants to ensure that the singularity isn't harmful to us. So, do you think you can program rules into a computer? Do you think the computer will be naturally destructive? Like what, you have that laws of robotics, but that was more sort of conceptual from a science fiction novel.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So those laws of robotics, it says, I won't harm a human. I'll always listen to a human, and I won't harm myself unless it conflicts with the first two. The problem is, I don't know how much everybody knows about machine learning and deep learning, but you essentially can't constrain it. You give it all of this data, and it learns patterns in the data, whether it's videos or pictures or people's faces or whatever the case might be. And then it makes decisions based on that. And you don't actually program it to do something. You make it learn how to do something through looking at examples. So I think it's really difficult to code in morality into a machine or an algorithm like that. I think if you want it to be intelligent, it's a catch-22. If you want it to be as intelligent as a human, you can't constrain it. But if you don't constrain it, it might do something bad to us. So, it's really hard to answer that one. Maybe just looking at a couple questions here about the brainwaves, right? So, Kriya, this one I really wanted to ask you, so I want to make sure we don't forget it. So, if we're all controlling computers through our brains, okay, so we are getting information, and maybe we know that it's coming from the internet or coming from a specific person or whatever, and maybe it's reading information from us. Being in media, how do you think ads will change? Do we just get a thought all of a sudden, like, why do I feel like McDonald's for some reason? Like, do you have any?
So in other words, you'll automatically start smelling KFC. Pretty much. I could totally see that happening. Dealing with advertising the way that it is at the moment, and Sean, you mentioned that social dilemma. And it's actually one of the movies I recommend to a lot of clients when they're trying to understand advertising and boosted advertising on social media. Is that already at the moment, for example, I am looking for a super, super, uber duper rare plant at the moment. And I mentioned it to Zash, who's my partner, and literally searched for it once. It is now showing up on every single platform physically possible, which you guys already know happens. That is what it is. But I think what's going to start changing is that we're going to start seeing it presented in different ways. So like you mentioned, Rishal, we're going to smell it. We're going to see it. It's going to maybe have that feeling when you bite into your KFC burger and after a really stressful day, or that feeling of sitting in the bath and drinking a glass of wine. I think if we get to the point where companies are going to do that, it's really going to, excuse my name, F up a lot of things, because now you don't have the freedom. You don't have the freedom of being able to switch it off. You don't have the freedom of being able to only open an app when you have free time or whatever the case is. It's really going to push things down on you. And that maybe also feeds into your ethics conversation. Is that something that advertisers should be allowed to do?
Do you think if there's a benefit for the consumer, right? Let's say, they get half off any of those deals if they allow these things, or the advertisers promise that whatever ads they push is always going to be with the consumer's best interest in mind. Do you think it makes it better at all?
Do you think that consumers nowadays keep to those rules anyway? I mean, advertising agencies, or they don't keep to those rules. They're doing things already that isn't within not only South African advertising laws, which are very different to international ones, but they don't keep to that. So why would they keep to it when they have a direct feed into your brain?
I see there's a hand raised.
Thanks, Rishal. So I have a question for Kriya, and sorry to bring this conversation back to more recent times. I know we're far in the future. But what I wanted to understand is, the way that social media makes it so addictive, right? Is that not good for your customers? How do you see that, and where do you draw the line?
So I think this lends to another ethical question. So for example, as a user, someone who uses a platform every single day, just like you guys do, and then looking at it from a client perspective, where our clients want to make money. At the end of the day, it's bottom line that counts. And I think that's where you're kind of going with this question, is that you have to kind of find a balance personally. So there's certain things that I won't necessarily go overboard with. Like, I'm not gonna myself join, not that we're making a drug joke again, but like, I'm not going to, not that we're allowed to advertise drugs, but I'm not gonna work with a drug company, but I'm going to work with the company that we're here with today. They're a wholesaler. They pride themselves on bringing well-priced goods that you would get in a Spar or a Checkers to consumers at a much lower price. So for me, working with a company like that and pushing advertising like that is something that I would do. I think from a business owner perspective, it also has to do a little bit with your morals and your ethics. The nice thing about it is that Facebook obviously has, which owns most of the social media platforms that we work with. Twitter's also got rules. They have advertising rules. So now, for example, you're not allowed to advertise any COVID-related products. So till today, you cannot say that you have face masks on sale and then boost that ad. You can run it as a normal post, but you won't be able to boost it. There's laws around, obviously, sex, drugs, abuse, to a point that even advertise contraceptives. It may not be like a drug or a harmful thing, but because some people might have feelings about abortion and contraception and all that sorts of stuff, you can't even refer to someone in a post saying they're fat, and Facebook will tell you to remove it. So the platforms are actually putting in a lot of rules to help guide that. And it's not a fact of us as advertisers ignoring it. You physically cannot, because they will ban you. They will take all your content down. They will not let you boost at all. They're actually super strict about it.
Interesting, based on what you just said, right? So we want to express ourselves as much as possible, but there's restrictions on that, okay? And then that narrative just being pushed down by the platform. So it's really interesting, because the same thing happened when Twitter banned Donald Trump, like, at the most crazy time. And, half of the users felt that that was unfair, that you can't ban someone for free speech, but there was misinformation involved. So it's so tricky, because then people go digging into people who are not banned, and they look for misinformation in their post, and they find it, right? So someone has this very powerful button that they can say, okay, I want to ban this person but not this person.
So what's interesting on that point is, and I think it comes down to your AI conversation as well, is that, let's say, for example, you do call somebody fat, right? That's freedom of speech. You're technically allowed to say it, but it's also what do they call it? You shaming somebody else. So let's say, for example, I report it as nudity or sex or harmful comments or whatever the case is. You report it, Sean reports it, and 7 other people report it. That content may not automatically get blocked because it actually goes down to a human being, which then reads it, puts the emotional context behind it, and then decide if the content is worth it or not. Hence why Donald Trump got banned.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I think on that question, it's similar to Sean and myself, I guess, when we, building software. So much like the advertising question, when you advertise something that you feel is not ethical, often there's dilemmas in the applications we build, right? And how we build them. Do you build them to be addictive? Do you build them to, do you even work with a specific organization? Will you build algorithms to guide missiles, right? Are you okay with building that? Or if you're building an app for the consumers, are you okay with making it really addictive? And I don't know how many of you know about dark patterns. So what we spoke about earlier with Instagram, the continuous feed is a dark pattern. I'm sure you've seen on booking.com, they tell you you've got like 10 people just book this. There's like 1 left. If you don't do it now, it's going to be gone. And like creating that urgency is also, a dark pattern. So like Sean, I don't know if you have any views on those dark patterns in social media and that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. They are designed to keep you hooked. I mean, why do notifications have to be a big red ball that kind of just stays there until you click on it to get rid of it? It's up there, sort of right-hand corner, and it's incredibly addictive. I mean, there are multiple other dark patterns that are utilized. I mean, even queuing up video after video of similar content, it's not necessarily a dark pattern, but it does what it says, but it's essentially there to keep you hooked. And I think it's becoming a big problem, at least for me as well. I've gone off most social media. I think I just have LinkedIn and WhatsApp, which is social media essentially. But yeah, I mean, it's the patterns are there. The patterns are there to keep you hooked. And the longer a system can sort of keep you using it, the more revenue it can create, the more data it can collect on you. It can create a richer profile of you to serve advertising. Not to be sort of derogatory of Google, but you could consider them kind of, kind of the largest ad agency on earth. Not that being in an agency is, I was at agency, so. But I'm just saying, you could think of them instead of as a tech company as like the most successful advertising company, which is sort of quite shocking if you think about their reach. So yeah, I think it's a big issue, definitely. Yeah, so this has been really awesome. I think just very quickly, I'm not going to get to some of the topics that I thought I might be able to touch on, although we did a hell of a lot. But if anyone wants to chat to me, that's in this panel, it's sean.buch@intellect.coza, or on LinkedIn, you can get hold of me. So a lot of the stuff that I'm very interested in, and Rish as well, is what does designing a good voice interface look like? How will AI then in turn enable voice interfaces and other forms of future interfaces? There are a lot of limitations there currently. Everyone wants the natural language, but then, as Rish says, we're kind of moving towards intelligence and sentience. How sentient, or how comfortable will we be with that level of sentience? So all of that stuff's really, really interesting. So please feel free to reach out to me and Rish about that. Okay, cool.
Thanks, Sean. Kriya, you have any closing words?
Yes, I may not be able to talk to you about sentient beings, but I can definitely chat to you about social media and digital marketing and how the consumer actually uses tech on a very simple level. So it's kriya@creativemedia.co.za. Give me a buzz.
Awesome. Thanks, Kriya. If you want to get in touch with me, probably LinkedIn, Twitter, my email is rishal@intellect.co.za. You can also find all my information on my website, rhurbans.com. Thanks for the kind words in the chat, everyone.
Thanks, Kriya. Thanks, everyone.
Cool. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.